Before I graduated from college, I had a bucket list. It had just one thing on it: run 10 marathons before you turn 30. That's something you could be proud of. When I graduated from college, I had to add something else to my bucket list, something I never thought I'd have to strive for or actively work towards: stay alive. Are you familiar with exposure therapy? Expose yourself to a little bit of the thing that's triggering in a somewhat controlled environment. It's proven to be helpful in a lot of cases, but in retrospect, it's probably not something I should have decided to do on the fly. For me, exposure therapy meant facing the one thing that stood between my past and my healing journey: the Golden Gate Bridge. Why? 5 years before, I was convinced that if life wasn't getting any better, there was no point anymore. I might as well hurl myself off the side to stop the pain. Few people survive. My chance of surviving should I jump were slim to none, and to my depressed mind, those were pretty good odds. But I was feeling better in that present moment. It had been nearly 3 years since the last time I was actively suicidal and had wanted to jump. To my healing mind, nothing could take me down. I wanted to process it all, send the depression and suicidal thoughts packing with a one-way plane ticket to any place I wasn't. It seemed like a logical next step in my healing process to destroy the trigger of the bridge once and for all. I wanted to say I could run across it, walk across it, skip across it, and not have any urge to jump off the side. If I could manage that, I could send my suicidal thoughts packing. My friend and I signed up to run the San Francisco Marathon together. Perfect. I thought I'd have moral support the whole time. She was one of a few people who knew my story, and she knew she might be getting herself into a 26.2-mile-long therapy session. At the end of it, I could say that I exposed myself to my biggest trigger, and I will have survived. I was nothing but excited for the race, until the day I got the, "Hey, sorry, I can't run the marathon with you anymore. Something else came up, but you'll be great," message from my friend. Shit. The panic started. I was going to have to do this thing on my own, without a running buddy, without someone to make sure I didn't get too close to the edge because I didn't trust myself enough to not jump off. I was hitting rock bottom, and I didn't want to talk about it. I was too afraid the response I'd get would be, "You can't run that marathon." The last thing I wanted was to be told I couldn't do it. I mentioned it offhandedly in therapy a few weeks before the race. I wanted support, I just didn't want to have to say it aloud. My anxiety was getting to be too much, and it came out. To be honest, I'm panicking every day because I have to run this race alone, and that damn bridge is a damn trigger for 99% of the suicidal ideation I've had in my life. So running across it alone isn't exactly at the top of my list. I braced myself for my therapist's response, hoping for the best, but ready for the worst. I remember the smile that spread across her face and the calmness of her voice as she reminded me. Things like this were the point of therapy. This was something we could tackle. Deep breaths. I was cutting it close. 2 more weeks. 2 weeks in which to learn the coping strategies that would make this marathon enjoyable and not the most terrifying experience of my life. I had the love running part down. Running was the one thing I knew could pull me out of a depressive episode, if I managed to find the motivation. And if I managed to even get a mile in, it would leave me high for the rest of the day. The sound of my feet hitting the pavement would make me smile. The smell of the fresh air would make me feel at peace. It was the emotional triggers that came with having chosen that particular marathon and the weeks of panic attacks I'd already had, with the expectation that it would be terrifying. I'd been too afraid to walk on the edge of any bridge by myself for years. The day of the marathon came. The gun went off and I started running. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran. I remember the excitement and the adrenaline as I approached the first hill, remembering my high school cross-country coach yelling at us to push it. I laughed to myself as I thought about her and sprinted as fast as I could up the hill. I remember feeling the raindrops falling down my face, helping to wash away the sweat. I remember looking out at the skyline and thinking, damn, that's beautiful. The things I do not remember: panicking or having suicidal thoughts, not for a single second. I smiled to myself. I did it. I made it through the first 10 miles. The bay and the bridge were behind me, and a giant lap around the city was all that stood between me and a very, very expensive beer celebrating my finish. I'd done it. As it turns out, the past doesn't have to dictate the future, and it's a lot easier to change the future with some support. It wasn't as terrifying if I just put words to it, because at least I wasn't living it alone. I would never have guessed that running a marathon would be what convinced me that I wanted to live. If I could conquer the thing that I thought would kill me someday, it was going to be okay. It was the beginning of honest conversations, the turning point in building the confidence I needed to know that I could stay alive. I finally got to take stay alive off of my bucket list. It didn't need to be there. Yes, the depression and suicidal thoughts will still come, but my will to live will be stronger. I have power over my thoughts and my feelings. Every single day is a tiny victory, but I'm refusing to give up, still fighting, and still alive. Thanks.